Welcome to Ignite to Impact, the podcast. This is Dr. Geneva, and today you will hear how to start a social impact company and do international business. And most importantly, you will find out how to learn in the process of building. Join me and my guest, Wright, founder and CEO of Shea Yeleen.
Welcome to Ignite to Impact, a weekly podcast about next generation leadership and what it takes to make a difference at work, with family, and in your community. Get ready to be inspired as we pull back the curtain and dive into intimate and energetic conversations with achievers and doers who are in the trenches navigating workplace politics and influencing change. Get ready to hear how leaders fail and get back up, learning how to keep it together while traveling in their leadership journey. Our mission, to help you with leadership tips and strategies that you can use to get fast results and help make your business, community, and world a better place. Now, here's your host, Master Leadership Strategist, Dr. Geneva Williams. So, let's ignite to impact.
Welcome to Ignite to Impact. This is Dr. Geneva. And, I don't know what you were doing this morning, but I spent some time washing my hair and also spent some time putting soothing lotion on my skin and looking in the mirror to make sure that I looked as good as I could look. Well, all of us do this in one way or another, and it takes us varying amounts of times in the morning when we're going out on that special occasion and we just want to be all that. Well, guess who I have with me on the phone talking to about just an entrepreneur extraordinaire. I am just so delighted. It's the founder and CEO of Shea Yeleen Health and Beauty, Rahama&nbsp. And she is here. She's the founder. She's not just the CEO. Now, that's kind of extra special when you not are only just the head person, but you birthed the idea. So I have the birther of Shea Yeleen, Health and Beauty. It's a social impact company, and we're going to learn all about what that is in case you don't know. But Rahama created this company after serving in the Peace Corps. And based in D.C., she develops shea butter creams, balms, and soaps that create living wage jobs for women in West Africa. Don't you want to hear about what she does? Oh, my goodness. Her products are currently distributed through select Whole Food markets, independent natural grocery stores, and MGM Resorts International. And I just am so delighted that she's joined us. And, having her with us is like having her in other places where she's been, like Magazine, the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and CNBC Africa. She also is a leading voice on African women economics and business development. She's presented at the United Nations on entrepreneurship and at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. She was appointed to the Presidential Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa, and that was in 2014. And she also serves as advisor to entrepreneurs at the Johns Hopkins University's Social Innovation Lab. And most recently, she appeared as a contestant on the BET-centric reality competition, Queen Boss, which focuses on women entrepreneurs. And so we are so delighted to welcome this avid traveler who has visited and worked in 30 different countries and is the boss, founder, and CEO of Shea Yeleen Health and Beauty Products, Rahama&nbsp. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geneva. Wow, that was an amazing intro.
And it's all true, isn't it? It's all true, right? All
true.
right.
we didn't make up any story.
That's right. It's a beautiful thing. So, oh my gosh, I have like about 100 different questions, but I'm going to start off with, so tell us about you.
Yeah, well, I grew up in upstate New York outside of Syracuse, and I come from a family where half my family is American, the other half of my family is Ghanaian on my mother's side. And so I've always been interested in African-related issues because in my household, my mom would tell me stories about what it was like growing up in Ghana. And even though I had not yet traveled there, I was just like so curious about women, about issues on the continent. And so that kind of sparked my interest in serving in the Peace Corps. So I studied international affairs in college, and then right after I graduated, I interned at the Department of State and also at an American embassy in Burkina Faso. And from there, joined the Peace Corps for 2 years. And that's when I started learning about shea butter.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was assigned to be in a community health center in a very small village in Mali, about an hour and a half outside of the capital, Bamako. And when I arrived, I'd never lived in kind of a rural African environment before. So the first time I was at the community health center, I would just see so many women coming into the health center, but then they would leave and they would have issues with like buying medicine, or their kids would be sick and they wouldn't be able to pay. And this was very nominal, not very expensive cost, but to them it was out of reach. So I started researching income generating activities for women. I was really interested in figuring out, how do these women who are primarily subsistence farmers, how else do they make money? That was kind of the question burning in my mind. And as I started researching, many of the ways that women make money was connected to agriculture. So, they harvest their vegetables and their fruits, and then they take it to the market, they sell. And that's kind of the way that they make money, or they make some food, sell it on the street, etc. And they also made shea butter. And I knew about shea butter. I never knew shea butter came from Africa. My mother is African. She's Ghanaian. And for me, it was just kind of like a shocking moment to realize this product that I was seeing on the shelves of, if you go into CVS or Rite Aid or Bath and Body Works, you see a product with shea in it. Never knew that where it came from and where it originated from was Africa. 19 countries through the Sahel Belt. They grow a tree. On that tree is a fruit. In that fruit is a nut. In the nut is a seed. And what shea butter is the oil that's extracted from the seed. So I had no idea. And as I was learning about the process and also learning about the fact that it's a women's activity, that this is something historically and traditionally is women's work, I became really fascinated by how we get products to market that's using labor from women in Africa, but these women were not being paid properly. They're not being compensated properly. Yet, the resource that they're utilizing is part of multi-billion-dollar industries, the confectionery industry and the health and wellness industry.
Wow. So what did you do?
Well, I had this fantastic idea. I was like, okay, now mind you, I was in my early 20s.
Right.
I had no business background. I had just graduated college, and I was like, I can solve this problem.
Yes. Well, see, that's one of the signs, though, of a true entrepreneur. You know, one who just says, hey, look, I can see it. I see the vision. I got it. I can grasp it, and I'm going to go get it.
Yep, all I needed was my Superwoman cape. So
and you had it.
I was like, grab that. And then I started, I actually just started by really learning, because it was something that I didn't know. And then I felt like if I didn't know, many consumers and people who use this product probably don't know either.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished my 2-year Peace Corps service, and then I moved to Washington, D.C. And when I moved back to the U.S. in 2005, initially I decided to start a nonprofit organization. I wasn't really thinking about the business market side. I was thinking more, these women need to be organized, they need to get training, they need access to capital, they need access to production equipment. So that's what I initially started doing, was figuring out how to create an ecosystem and get access to resources to help build these women's capacity to create a product. Because a lot of people don't know this, 90% of shea that leaves the continent of Africa is not processed into shea butter. It's actually the raw material, the seed. So in the same way they, export out cotton, it goes to China, it's made into T-shirts, and then it's exported back, to these countries.
Yes.
Shea butter is the same. It's the raw material is exported to Europe and Asia.
Okay.
Chemical processing and refining happens, and then global distribution happens. So for me, it was like, well, how can these women, instead of selling off their raw material, how can they actually gain access to the resources, the training, the equipment that they need, so they can process this shea butter, utilizing their knowledge, utilizing the traditional process, and then distributing a value-added product to customers. So that was kind of what I was thinking. I wanted to, essentially in the beginning, create the ecosystem, create the structure, create the process. And I thought the nonprofit model would be the best way to do it. And I actually had the nonprofit model for a few years, and I ran into a few challenges. And in 2012, I pivoted to really identify the market link, because I was finding that, yes, the capacity building was important. Yes, the investment in training and access to production equipment and capital was important. But if these women were making a product and no one was buying it, then I was only providing a partial solution. What I really needed to do was figure out the market connection piece to create revenue that would then go back into investing in the lives of these women. So in 2012, I kind of did that pivot, and it was also the year that I was able to get a line of products launched into Whole Foods. And then from there, about 2 years later, I was able to get my first round of venture capital funding from a small fund supported by Ron Lauder and Dick Parsons.
Okay. Rahama, I'm just captivated by this story, but I also heard you skip over some parts that I want to really dive a little deeper. You said you were able to do these things when you made this pivot. So how were you able to? Tell us about that.
In terms of pivoting, so imagine young black woman in her 20s trying to get grant funding from large institutions for a nonprofit.
Right.
Very, very challenging. One, because of the risk, and two, just the way the nonprofit structure is, the emphasis on ensuring that you have certain systems in place, and also, too, that funding normally is, as I found, was earmarked to organizations that just had a much longer track record of success, whether it was in women's issues, international development, etc. So it was really hard for me. I would, write grant proposals, I would send letter of inquiries out, and I would just continue to get rejected, and I was self-funding. And, wasn't making a lot of money working part-time jobs here and there. And so I started looking at other ways to fund my idea, and this is when I learned about social impact investing.
Okay.
So the investor model is a little bit different in that investors are more likely to take risk, calculated risk, And they're more likely to invest in ideas that they believe can be profitable, right? So what's in it for them? They put their money in, and then they expect to get it out at a return. And so what social impact investors do, they want to invest in something that they can get a return on, but they're equally interested in the social benefits of the idea. So for Shea Yeleen, the idea of bringing a natural, clean beauty product to market that is also supporting economic development and addressing rural poverty can attract an investor that's interested in both things. And so that's one of the reasons I did that pivot, to really create the legal structure of creating a business, an LLC, that could then take on investor funding, social impact investor funding, to help me grow and scale my idea.
And so how's it working for you? I remember when the whole social impact movement first started, and it certainly has grown through the years. But one of the big challenges had been to find that perfect marriage. That is where you could get the ROI, the return on investment, and equally the social benefit. So how is it working for you?
It's been working. It has positives and negatives,
Okay.
like everything.
Tell us about both.
But I will say this, that it's given me an opportunity to scale Shea Yeleen to a point where I couldn't have done it on my own.
Okay.
So that's been the positive.
That's a real plus.
Yes. Getting a product to market. Most people can't even get their products to market. And so that has been tremendous in terms of being able to have a product in stores that's selling and that's also contributing to our social mission in northern Ghana. The challenge that I've had, however, has been in a couple of things. One, I went from bootstrapping Shea Yeleen with absolutely no kind of like experience or knowledge on investors, and then I got pretty large investors. And so it's been a learning curve. Understanding things like investor relationships, investor expectations. It's very different when you're on your own and you're kind of working on your idea versus now having to be held accountable and having to reach certain milestones. And so that additional pressure was something that I didn't expect going in. The other thing that I would say is, one of the things I've learned that's more on the challenge side is that not all investors are the same. And so getting an investor, one of the things I really like to encourage people is to make sure that your investors are also providing resources outside of funding, right? Because business is about relationships. And if your investors can give you warm introductions, if your investors are utilizing smart capital, so not just writing a check, but also in the weeds with you as an entrepreneur, really being able to be a soundboard when challenges are occurring, when something might not have gone as you expected. I think all of that is really important. And I've been fortunate enough to have the ability to surround myself with people who've gone through that process, who can give advice. So there's this organization, for example, called the Social Venture Network that I recommend, that really provides, I was one of their fellows, and they really provided like support and resources. And so for some of your listeners who are venturing out to be entrepreneurs or wanting to learn about how do I find like the right investor for my business, that's a resource that I would really recommend, because it's not easy. And one of the things that is so important is making sure you have the right people around you.
Yes, and then I would think that you've become, ever since you've been in this, you've become very adept at establishing those relationships in networking and in listening and in learning as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I also think, too, that as I've been on my entrepreneurial journey, the one consistent thing that's happened is the unexpected.
Okay.
And I think beyond, yes, you need to have the right business plan and marketing plan, and you 100% need to have a strong financial model. And all of those things need to be perfectly aligned in order for anyone to be able to scale their business. But I also think it's important to understand, how do you deal when things don't work out the way you expect?
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with disappointment? How do you deal with this concept of failure? Because one of the things that I found is that I'm learning in the process of building. And sometimes when you're learning in the process of building, things might not work out the way you expect, but you're learning and you can adjust and you can adapt. And so I think those are equally important to kind of having, all of your ducks in the row.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how did you deal with the unexpected?
Well, there's always the immediate response of crying.
Yes. Yes.
You got to get it out.
Yes.
But,
and that's good to say, because there are many folk who won't admit that. And so I thank you for saying that as a first one. That's the real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tears.
Oh no, there have been tears. Let me tell you, Dr. Geneva.
Yes.
There have been real tears.
Okay.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Because, it's a journey and a process. And I think I've had to learn that. I started Shea Yeleen when I was 23. So I'm no longer 23.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that I've had to learn that what I'm trying to build does not happen overnight. And it's not going to be kind of like this easy, linear, process. There are going to be some twists and turns, and I might have to go up a mountain and come back down to the valley. And when you finally accept that, when you're on your entrepreneurial journey, it makes it easier, because then you feel more comfortable with how things are going, because you realize this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see like these large companies that are so successful, there's always a story of the challenges that they've had to go through. And I think that we have to remember, to get to that, huge level of success that we want to get to, we're going to have to go through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with everything, there's seasons. There's seasons where it's amazing, and then there's seasons where it's not so good. And the way I've dealt with it, honestly, has been through my faith. I think that I can't imagine anything else in life that could have worked out my faith like being an entrepreneur. It's kind of like when you're building that muscle, you have to put some stress and pressure on it.
Mm-hmm.
And being an entrepreneur has brought definitely a lot of stress and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And what is working and what has been working out in me is my faith that, when I was in this village serving as a volunteer, and this idea that popped in my mind and my heart, there was a reason for that, and that I had to keep going and believing and trusting in that, seed that was planted, 12, 13 years ago.
Yes.
And that's how I've dealt with it. And outside of my faith, of course, just making sure that I can recognize and discern having the right people around me. That can at times be a little bit tough. But when you have that core group of people that, you can go to those people for advice, they know, and they have the skill set, and they have the ability to give you the right advice, it's absolutely a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you're telling us that there will be tears, but there is faith and the right people surrounding you, and you can make it. It can be done.
Absolutely.
Yes. So
initially, go ahead.
No, please.
No, initially, honestly, if you had asked me, Rahama, what were your biggest challenges, or what are your biggest challenges? Maybe like 5 or 7 years ago, I would be like, money. I need money. If I don't get money, I'm not going to be able to be successful. And yes, money is really important. But now, after going through my first round of funding and actually getting a product to market, I've realized people are actually what you need. Money is great. Money is absolutely kind of the fuel that you need. But in order to keep going, and in order to really continue on that journey, you need the right people.
Absolutely.
And so now I say, finding, attracting uplifting, building the right people to be on my team and to get, the access to the right talent, that truly is, when you get to a certain level, the difference between being successful and the difference between shutting your doors.
Mm-hmm. So money helps, but people solve problems.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Exactly.
you need them with you and around you. So, Rahama, how do you, again, you've shared, obviously very successful, but you've been very open about the trials, tribulations, the times when you had to, use those tears were flowing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for self-care? How do you take care of you during this phenomenal journey that you're going through?
Self-care to me is every single day, and it might sound a little strange, but every day I try to, at least one time in the day, see if I can hear my heartbeat.
Okay.
And
Now, what does that mean? What do you mean? You actually sit down and put your hand over your heart, or do you have an Apple Watch where you can, check your heart rate? How do you do that?
So I do that by getting into a very quiet place and just listening. And so it's unless you're like running really fast or like exercising, or sometimes it's really hard to hear your heartbeat, right? But if you get into a quiet enough place and just sit there, you can feel your heart beating and you can also hear your heart. And why I do that is it calms me down.
Okay.
Whatever is happening, however that day, is unfolding, if I can tap into my heart and calm myself down, and also recognize the fact that my heart is beating means I'm still here. It means I still have time. It means it's not over yet. It means keep going. That to me is the way that I give myself care outside of going to church and praying and meditation. Like, that has been so powerful for me, because sometimes I think we forget that we are amazing creations, that, there's only one of us. There could be a million other people doing exactly the same thing I'm doing, but there's only one me doing this the way that I'm doing it.
Yes.
And when you tap into your heart and your heartbeat, to me, it's so powerful, because I did not create this heart, right? And the fact that it is what is keeping me alive, it to me has just been, I don't know. it is the way that I tap into the magicalness
yes.
of our being.
Yes.
And sometimes the work that we're doing, particularly when you're a social entrepreneur, it's not about just selling any product, making profit, and then, you're doing well. It's really about changing something that's wrong in this world. And for me to travel to Africa, to travel to these villages, and see people who look just like me struggling for no reason, who have access to resources that people are buying and people are using, I want to change that. I want them to benefit. I want them to be able to improve their standard of living, not with handouts, but actually by building the right business model that allows them to have jobs, that give them the ability to work in safe conditions, that give them the ability to have living wages, so that they can improve their life and as well as the lives of their children. So for me, sometimes it just feels so too big. The problem is too big. I can't do it. I can't. And when you kind of tap into yourself and you realize that you have power, and that power can be used to chip away at the issues that we have in this world, to me, it's what gets me up every single day.
I love it. I mean, I just can't tell you how much I love it. So you're making a profit, but more importantly, you're making a difference. You're making that difference in the lives of people. You can see it, touch it, and feel it. And then you're making a difference, again, in two ways, because your product feels so good when you put it on. So, people that you don't even know or what have you, people here in the States and elsewhere, they're benefiting from your profit. But then you have the women in Ghana that you're working with, and you see them and touch them and you know them, and you know how that makes such a difference. I can see why when you get up every morning and your feet touch the floor that you're happy and joyful and grateful.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear it in your voice. Now, I want to ask you, at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in I think it was in Nairobi in 2015, one of the things that you said was, quote, "Don't wait for anyone to give you permission to do what you believe in," end quote. You remember saying that?
I do, because
Tell us about it. What does that mean?
When I first started Shea Yeleen, it was just, oh, wow, this is such a cute little girl. She has this idea, and people, people I would tell the idea to. And imagine, I had just come back. I was extremely excited. I would talk to anyone who would give me 2 seconds of time. It didn't matter if it was at the bus stop, train station, at the grocery store, at the doctor's office. I was a little obsessed. And it was often surprising to me. I would share my idea, and people would be like, "Well, do you have your master's degree yet? Maybe you should go to business school. Maybe you should do this first. Maybe." And it was all, good advice. I'm not saying any of it wasn't, but it was always like, "You're not ready." It was kind of like, "Don't do it until you do this first.
Okay.
Don't do it until you get X amount of years of experience. Don't do it until this happens." And then even one time, this gentleman who was a little bit, much older, he was like, "Well, don't you want to get married and have kids?"
Oh, yeah.
And so it was always like, I would put out into the world this idea and this dream and vision I'd have. And then I would get back, "It's not, you're not ready." And I just ignored it, and I just kept going. I'm a Leo, by the way, so you know how Leos are.
Okay.
The
lion. The lion.
And so I would listen, and then I would just do what I thought I needed to do. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes we do wait for people to say, "You're ready, go ahead, it's your turn." And guess what? That might never happen. And then time will happen whether or not you're pursuing what you love. So why not pursue what you believe in and what you love?
Yes. And then, that Leo, that also reminds me of leaders, Leo, leaders. And you clearly are one of our next generation leaders, and it's wonderful. And you know what else on this poster that I was reading from, where, you had this quote about don't wait for anyone to give you permission to do what you believe in. Then the subtitle after your name says, "Makes shea butter from seeds, employs 800. That is just so powerful. I mean, it's all, so that you're doing this, and it's so simple. You've figured out how to take this idea using the naturalness of where the product comes from, and your belief in the people and your work with the people. That's too. It's so authentic. And then you're employing people by doing this, 800. So it's just a beautiful thing, and one of those great things I like to think about, talk about, and be inspired about in terms of this whole new crop of leaders that we now have who are making a difference in the world. And so
Thank you, Dr. Geneva.
I just love it. I love it. So tell me, on that note of leadership and making a difference and what you do, what are your next steps? Where do you see yourself? How are you going to continue to make this impact?
Yeah. Well, let me just say that number is so important, but in Ghana alone, over 600,000 women are involved in the shea butter industry.
Oh,
so
no,
what Shea
stop.
Yeleen is doing
Oh, my goodness.
Is a drop in the bucket. And I want your listeners to hear this because
Okay,
my vision...
So say that again now. Wait a minute. Let's back up. Let's do that. So from the whole processing of the shea butter and the nuts and all of that, there's 600,000 women?
There are 600,000 women in Ghana alone that are involved in the shea industry.
I see.
So
Okay.
from harvesting to sorting to collecting.
Okay.
There are producers, there are seed collectors. So what we're doing is a drop in the bucket in terms of how many women, because that's just one country, and there are about 19 countries in Africa that grow the shea tree. And so there are millions of women in this industry. They're all African women. They're mostly in very rural communities where there is no, running water, no access to electricity, no access to roads, etc. And they are stuck in a cycle of poverty, although they are part of industries that utilize their resource. For example, the chocolate making industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, the personal care and wellness industry, which is a multi-million-dollar industry, and growing. Both of these industries are growing. So yes, sometimes I get a little like, I know I'm doing good work with Shea Yeleen, but more needs to be done. But in order for more to be done, consumers need to change the way they buy. So consumers need to realize every time you buy a product with shea butter, a woman in Africa is being impacted. And she can be impacted in a way where she is able to improve her standard of living, or she could be impacted in a way where she's continued to be trapped in the cycle of poverty. We need consumers to be very picky about what shea butter brands they use.
Okay, so
and
tell
very
us.
Picky very picky about the types of products they're using. Not just because they want to do a good thing, but actually the shea butter women are making in these rural communities is better for you. It's better for the customer. Why? It's not being chemically processed in large seed oil manufacturing facilities in Europe and Asia. Instead, it's being made in environments where these women are utilizing a traditional process of hand crafting the shea that has zero chemicals. And so it's better for you in terms of your hair care. It's better for you in terms of your skin care. So that's really important for me because my vision is that every single shea product one day will benefit a woman in Africa.
So we should be buying Shea Yeleen, and that's SHEAYELEEN. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
I want to make sure, I get that right.
Yes, you got it right.
Okay. All right. I just can't tell you what an inspiring conversation this has been for me. And I've learned so much. And I just love that you're a social impact company. And because of the work that I do, I was, in the middle of it and studying it and being involved when the whole social impact movement started. And just to really have an upfront and personal conversation with someone who is really making a difference in that whole new field. I mean, it's really social entrepreneurship at its purest that you're doing. This selling of natural health and beauty products while empowering women in Ghana. Just, having both of those, being able to do both of those, I think is just so inspiring. And we wish you the best. And now you can get your product at Whole Foods MGM Resorts. Where else?
You can get it on our website, SheaYeleen.com, and also on Amazon. Amazon also sells our products.
Yes, Shea Yeleen, yes, on Amazon too. Rahama, Wright, we just are so inspired by you. Thank you for igniting impact in Ghana and right here at home. Thank you so much for doing that and being my guest today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Geneva. And maybe next time you'll be chatting with one of our Shea producers. I would love that.
Would love that. Let's plan on doing that.
Okay.
All right. That's
that.
A date. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
You've been listening to Ignite to Impact with your host, Dr. Geneva Williams, an award-winning executive, facilitator, and master leadership strategist. Dr. Geneva is passionate about inspiring others to get their own leadership on and empowering the next generation with leadership tools and tips to help make the world a better place. Sign up to download Dr. Geneva's audiobook on leadership. Get the show notes, links, and other resources at drgenevaspeaks.com. That's drgenevaspeaks.com. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast to those in your community via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Google+, and leave us a 5-star review in iTunes. When you do that, it helps others find the show better. Send your questions or comments to info@drgenevaspeaks.com and use the hashtag Ignite2Impact.